Hey everyone, this is WobblyWallaby. Novice Guardian's Cart Tornado got a buff in the recent Ragnarok Mobile Eternal Love update. A build that was once so strong that the devs had to put high wind damage reduction in popular PvE instances. But these days, this build has lost its popularity. You can see refined 15 weapons being left unsold in the exchange. Today, I will discuss Cart Tornado Novice Guardian in PvE, the rise, the fall, and the future. I'll also show the Cart Tornado build in action post-buff. First, the buff to Cart Tornado was the skill cooldown going from 3.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Cart Tornado Novice Guardian has been very strong build in the past. In fact, back in 2020, Cart Tornado got nerfed from 2 seconds to 3.5 seconds. So unfortunately, this recent buff didn't revert it back to its glorious 2 seconds. Now Toquan, as well as others, mentioned the big drop in DPS from his experimentation. However, even with the nerf 5 years ago, with the release of Legend Museum in September 2021 and Legend Isles in April 2022, these instances were dominated by Ruin Master and Novice Guardian when it came to DPS. This was the era before hero classes. Also, this was back before Ancient Equipment, Shadow Equipment, and Memory Equipment, and it was very difficult to get enough ignore defense for these instances. And that was where the third line of Ruthless/Ruin became incredible. While using Overthrust, you would completely ignore defense, so you no longer needed ignore defense gear, and you could focus on damage increasing gear instead. This also meant for people that weren't able to get morale and chance, it didn't matter because you completely ignored defense anyways. Now, the other overpowered ruin was the Swift Storm Star ruin, where the Cart Tornado forms around you, so you basically double your DPS if you're near the target. As a free-to-play player, if you had these two ruins with the third lines, you could play this build and do quite well. And this is obviously very different from these days, where you often need 6 ruins with second lines in order to play these classes efficiently, so I don't think the devs were very happy about this. So Novice Guardian was so dominant in Legend Isles and Museum that these days instances have 90% wind damage reduction, whereas for other elements it is at 50%. And that reduction hurts, even to this day. This also made other classes that were stuck to wind suffer too. So you can thank Novice Guardian for these awful wind damage reductions we have. Now, Novice Guardian was also very popular in boss hunting since you have insanely high movement speed and you can hit super hard too. It was to the point where sometimes people put down earth fields just to counter Cart Tornado. Back in the day, Novice Guardian was my main class and I did a ton of boss hunting and PvE instances with it. But I think where Novice Guardian started to lose popularity was the release of Saitama in November 2022 as part of the anime collab with One Punch Man. Saitama was able to do insane damage to a single target and also have continuous DPS, and that made it amazing for Legend Isles, Legend Museum, and boss hunting. Saitama also has the huge advantage that you can convert his damage to any element, which means you aren't wind locked like Cart Tornado. As a result, you could frequently take advantage of elements to do more damage. I'd say that the next huge hero class that competed with Novice Guardian was Ragnarok, which was released July 2023. Ragnarok was one of the first hero classes that could hit critical stats for skill damage and ignore defense pretty easily, has incredible survivability, and scaled off attack and magic attack, and could also convert to any element including self-converting to holy. Novice Guardian doesn't have good skill damage, so you have to rely on cards and gachas. And once other hero classes could deal with ignore defense easily and have high DPS, that is where Novice Guardian started to look worse in comparison. Things didn't look better when Thor was released in February 2024. Thor is also stuck to wind, but the devs decided to give Thor ways to increase wind's counter multiplier against all elements via lightning power, and also give him huge damage multipliers like physical attack times 3500% in fast attack intervals. So even with 90% wind damage reduction, Thor can still melt bosses much more than Novice Guardian, so the devs never lowered the wind damage reductions even with a paid hero class being stuck to wind, so this is sad news for this build. And then after Thor, there would be many other hero classes that would start power creeping non-hero classes, so it wasn't just Novice Guardian, but many other classic classes would perform much worse in PvE. And then there was Kalitzberg, released June 2024, who gets ignore defense based on penetration percentage, and you can get crazy high ignore defense without needing to sacrifice for DPS gear. Also, with the future collab happening at the end of the year, Eyes is also stuck to wind, but her damage modifiers are so crazy high that even with heavy wind reductions it doesn't matter, so again the devs won't be changing the wind reductions. So how about the current state post-buff? I'll show some footage and PV instances later in the video to give you an idea of how Novice Guardian Cart Tornado behaves these days, but it isn't great when compared to hero classes. But for those who love Novice Guardians and want to convert, luckily with Khafra's release in October 2025, it can convert teammates' damage even when elementally locked. For example, I have Professional Alignment which works on teammates and I have Wind set. I hit the target dummy for 1 million, the dummy is Earth. Next I convert to Fire with Professional Alignment. Now I hit for 3.1 million, so it does convert Cart Tornado to Fire, which is awesome, but unfortunately there is a cooldown on this skill, so it isn't up 100% of the time, but it does open up some new possibilities. So how about the future? I think the devs need accessories that give wind damage, similar to that of water and fire accessories. I feel like it's much harder to get wind damage to match the reductions, either that or give Novice Guardian skills to get a ton of wind elemental damage like Thor. Also, cremisi released beta server stats for Oracle 20, which will require 220% ignore defense. So who knows, a couple of years from now, maybe we'll need 300% ignore defense and then we'll all be crawling back to Novice Guardian for completely ignoring defense. So who knows, I'm not super optimistic, but we'll see. If you really love Novice Guardian, I'd say the one that has the more potential is the Magic Novice Guardian build that has much more damage. Before I continue, I want to thank LDCloud for sponsoring this video. I've used LDCloud for many months and it's made my life much simpler. I use the unlimited multi-instances to help manage multiple Ragnarok mobile accounts. For example, here I have 2 alts to help me with my instances and boss hunting. I click on this button and I can select my second instance and then manage my second class. It's super smooth and responsive. These instances run stable and uninterrupted 24/7, so I could park my character in Void Maps or Abyss Lake and be AFK while on auto. I'm happy I can do this stuff without consuming my phone or computer's RAM or battery. I've used instances in Singapore to access Southeast Asia games and United States for global games, which is great to get past region-locked games. To get started, register through my exclusive link to enjoy a 6-hour free trial with no download required. Here I visit the link with my web browser, then click Register Now. I register with my Google account, and then I see the 0.27 US credit, which lets me try it out for 6 hours for free. And yes, you can also use this on your web browser too. So definitely give it a try. I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as I do. Next, with these buffs, I decided to give Novice Guardian a try. I followed a guide made by my friend Destranged from 2 years ago. You can follow those for the skills, runes, gears, and explanation. And honestly, I haven't played Novice Guardian seriously in PvE for about 2 years, so let's see how this goes. First, I'm going to use a semi-free-to-play build. Here's my gear overview. I'm not using any MVP cards or pay-to-win relics. I do use quite a few mini cards. Also, I'm at 92% deposit with 3,833 attack. Unfortunately, I removed all my gachas and I can't go any lower, so this is as much of a semi-free-to-play experience as I can get. Also, for skill rotation, in general, it is to call Spirit 5 times, then prepare for Elite, Magnum Break, then Cart Tornado, then Mount since more movement speed increases Cart Tornado damage, then Cart Tornado and Mount again. When Magnum Break wears off, then recast that, and then repeat with Cart Tornado followed by mounting. Even with the skill cooldown reduced to 2.5 seconds, I found remounting to be fairly easy. First is the Legend Dragon. The damage per tick is high. You do have to be very close to the target to have your Self Tornado do a lot of damage. The frequency and damage doesn't seem as high as other classes, so even if your damage per tick is pretty high, the amount of damage you get per second is not as high as other classes. I also found the survivability to be a bit bad, since you don't have built-in lifesteal. You do have auto res, but that cooldown is quite long, and I honestly want to control my anti-death a bit more, similar to using Asphyxia for Ruin Master, which lasts for 8 seconds. I'll be honest, I could really feel the wind damage reduction. Even with fairly high attack deposit percentage, when I use other physical classes that can convert to fire, it felt much easier. After the dragon goes down, I show my stats. At 44,000 attack, 74% penetration, 33% skill damage increase. Unfortunately for Novice Guardians, getting a lot of skill damage is pretty hard. I've turned 30.2% damage, 119.2% physical damage increase, and 95% wind damage. Now I tried the same setup for PSR and it was really low damage. Again, a lot of work with wind. For people in parties that struggle with PSR, going fire or having dark convert and people using holy helps a lot. But Cart Tornado can't really take advantage of this unless you have a Caphra, but unfortunately it's a lot of extra work and not ideal in public parties. I feel like using Klitzberg is a lot easier than having to use Novice Guardian. Now, using the same gear and just changing the weapon, I had used Thor. Thor was able to deal significantly higher damage to the PSR dragon than Novice Guardian Cart Tornado. So being stuck to wind isn't really the problem, it's the power and wind damage percentage that makes Thor viable, whereas Novice Guardian just isn't. Next, for PSR Round 2, I swapped in some more pay-to-win cards. I put in MVP cards on many of my slots. I also used Lord of Vane for my relic. Now, I still felt the damage was too low, and I honestly wouldn't recommend the Cart Tornado build for players. If you struggle to have Ignore Defense, Klitzberg is a much better option with higher damage and better survivability due to lifesteal. Klitzberg also has great target damage reduction buff, so if you're not doing a lot of damage, you can still help your party out. So sadly for the Novice Guardian Cart Tornado build, I don't think the buffs were impactful enough, and I really hope the devs will continue to give this class more love in the future. So what are your thoughts on Novice Guardian? Let me know in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Here's a video that I'd recommend, and if you want more class recommendations, check out this playlist over here.